The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation and the clinking of silverware, but Alexander Harrison barely noticed. He swirled his whiskey, seeking a moment of solitude before returning to work. Then he felt it, small arms wrapping around his waist. He tensed. Pulling away was his first instinct, but when he looked down, his breath caught. A little girl with dark brown hair and striking blue eyes clung to him, gripping his suit like she had been waiting for him. She beamed up at him. "Daddy." The room blurred. His pulse pounded. He didn't have a daughter. Did he? The restaurant was quiet, filled with the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware against fine china. Alexander Harrison sat alone at his usual table, a corner booth with a perfect view of the city skyline through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. He had chosen this place not just for the excellent food but because it offered something he rarely found: privacy. Tonight was supposed to be just another routine evening. A quiet dinner after a long day of negotiations, a moment to himself before returning to his high-rise penthouse where he would inevitably check emails until exhaustion forced him to sleep. He wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. Until it happened. He had just taken a sip of his whiskey when he felt it, two small arms wrapping tightly around his waist from the side. He tensed immediately. He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed unexpected physical contact, least of all from strangers. His first instinct was to pull away, to demand an explanation, but then he looked down. A little girl with dark brown hair and the brightest blue eyes was clinging to him. She couldn't have been older than 6, her tiny frame barely reaching his waist even as she stood on her tiptoes. Her face was pressed against his side as if she had been waiting for him, as if she knew him. Then she looked up, beaming at him with a smile so pure it nearly took his breath away. "Daddy." His entire world tilted. The sound of that word, so innocent and sure, echoed in his ears. He froze, his mind scrambling for an explanation, but none made sense. He didn't have a daughter. He had never fathered a child. And yet here she was, hugging him as if she had just found someone she had been searching for her entire life. The room around him seemed to slow. Conversations faded, the ambient music dulled to a distant hum, and all he could focus on was the little girl looking up at him like he was the most important person in the world. Something in his chest tightened, an unfamiliar pull that unsettled him more than her presence itself. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to break through the haze of confusion. "Sweetheart," he said, keeping his voice calm, "I think you might be mistaking me for someone else." But she just giggled, shaking her head. "No, I know it's you." He inhaled sharply, searching her face, looking for any sign that this was some kind of elaborate joke. But there was none. She was completely serious. Before he could say anything else, he noticed something, a small birthmark on the inside of her left arm. A distinct, heart-shaped mark that sent a ripple of unease through him. He didn't understand why, but something about it felt familiar. Before he could press further, a panicked voice rang through the restaurant. "Emma." His head snapped up just in time to see a woman rushing toward them, her face filled with both relief and sheer panic. She reached for the little girl, gently pulling her away from him, but the child resisted. The woman, Cassandra Wells, froze the second her eyes met his. Alex felt the air leave his lungs. He knew that face. He knew those same blue eyes. And suddenly, everything inside him told him that this was not a mistake. This was a moment that would change everything. Alex felt as though the entire restaurant had faded into the background. The murmurs of other patrons, the clinking of silverware, the faint sound of jazz playing in the background, all of it disappeared the moment he locked eyes with Cassandra Wells. He hadn't seen her in 6 years, yet the sight of her now sent a shock through his entire system. She was frozen in place, her hand still gripping the little girl's wrist, her expression shifting from panic to something unreadable. He wasn't sure what stunned him more, seeing her again after all this time or the fact that she had just pulled away a child who had called him daddy. Cassandra opened her mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted to Emma, then back to him, hesitation flickering across her face. It was as though she had been caught in the middle of something she never expected to be exposed. Alex stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished hardwood floor. He had no idea what he was supposed to say. His mind was working through too many thoughts at once, trying to process the impossible. He glanced down at the little girl, Emma, who was still smiling at him, completely unaware of the storm building between the adults. His gaze moved to the birthmark on her arm again, something tugging at the back of his memory. He had seen that mark before. He didn't know where, but something about it felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. He turned back to Cassandra, his voice low and firm. "What the hell is going on?" Cassandra tightened her grip on Emma's hand. "Alex, this isn't the place." "Isn't the place?" he repeated, incredulous. "A little girl just ran up to me and called me her father. You show up out of nowhere after disappearing for 6 years, and you think now isn't the place." Cassandra swallowed hard. She looked like she wanted to run, but she didn't. Instead, she knelt down beside Emma and smoothed back her daughter's hair in a calming gesture. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "why don't we go sit over there for a minute while I talk to Mr. Harrison?" Emma frowned, confusion flashing in her eyes. "But I want to stay with Daddy." Alex's chest tightened at the word again. The way she said it so naturally, without doubt, as if she had known him her entire life. Cassandra forced a smile. "I know, baby, but I need to talk to him first. Just for a little bit, okay?" Emma hesitated but eventually nodded. She let go of Cassandra's hand and walked toward an empty booth across the room. A waiter, clearly sensing the tension, kindly offered her a small glass of juice, distracting her just enough. As soon as Emma was out of earshot, Alex turned back to Cassandra, his voice sharp. "Tell me the truth. Is she mine?" Cassandra's fingers curled into fists at her sides. Her body was tense, like she was bracing for impact. "Alex, please," she whispered. He shook his head. "No. No more avoiding it. No more excuses. No more running away. Just tell me the truth." Her eyes glistened under the warm restaurant lighting. She glanced toward Emma again, as if trying to decide whether or not she could say the words out loud. Then, in a voice so quiet he almost didn't hear it, she said, "Yes." The air was sucked from his lungs. His entire body went rigid, his mind refusing to process the weight of what she had just admitted. "She's your daughter," Cassandra continued, barely able to look at him. "She always has been." For a moment, Alex couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He had spent years believing his life was completely under his control, that he knew everything about the world he had built for himself. But now, in the span of a single moment, everything had been ripped out from under him. "How could you not tell me?" he asked, his voice quieter now, laced with something dangerously close to pain. Cassandra exhaled shakily. "Because I was scared, Alex. Because you were so focused on your company, on your success, on making sure you were at the top. I convinced myself that if I told you, it wouldn't change anything. That you wouldn't want this. That you wouldn't want her." His jaw clenched. "You didn't even give me the chance to prove you wrong." Cassandra finally met his gaze fully, her own filled with regret. "I know." Alex raked a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. He had a daughter. A little girl who had gone 6 years without knowing him, without him knowing her. And it wasn't because of some tragic circumstance or fate, it was because the one woman he had once trusted had made a decision for him. He glanced toward Emma again. She was swinging her feet as she sipped from her juice, completely oblivious to the war raging inside of him. When he looked back at Cassandra, his expression had hardened. "This isn't over. You don't just get to decide when I do or don't exist in her life." Cassandra nodded, looking down. "I know. His fingers curled into fists at his sides as he forced himself to breathe. I want to see her again. Cassandra hesitated, but then, after a long moment, she nodded. Okay. Alex wasn't sure if he was more relieved or angry. But one thing was certain. His life had just changed forever, and there was no going back. The next morning, Alex sat in his office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Normally, this view gave him a sense of accomplishment, a reminder of everything he had built from the ground up. But today, he felt nothing. His mind was stuck in an endless loop, replaying the events of the night before. Emma. The way she had run to him without hesitation, the way she had smiled up at him with those bright blue eyes that mirrored his own. The way she had called him daddy like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then there was Cassandra. He had barely slept, still unable to wrap his head around the fact that she had kept this from him for 6 years. He had gone over 100 different scenarios in his head, trying to understand why she had made that choice. She had said she was scared, that she thought he wouldn't want to be a father. That was the part that ate at him the most. Had he really been so focused on his career that she had believed he wouldn't have cared? Had he made her feel like she and their daughter would have been a burden? A sharp knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He turned just as his assistant, Mark, stepped inside. Sir, you have a meeting in 10 minutes, Mark said, but then hesitated when he saw the look on Alex's face. Everything all right? Alex exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. No. But I don't have time to deal with it right now. Mark gave a slow nod, clearly not convinced, but he didn't push further. Should I reschedule? Alex shook his head. No. Keep it as it is. Mark nodded and stepped out, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts once more. He wasn't sure how he was supposed to focus on work today, not when everything in his life had just been turned upside down. His phone vibrated on the desk. He glanced at the screen, his pulse kicking up slightly when he saw the message. Cassandra, Emma asked about you this morning. I told her she'll see you today. Can you meet us at the park at 3? Alex didn't hesitate before typing out his response. Alex, I'll be there. It wasn't a question. It wasn't something up for debate. He had missed 6 years of his daughter's life. He wasn't about to miss another second. By the time 3 p.m. rolled around, he was already at the park, standing near the entrance, scanning the area for any sign of them. He wasn't sure why he felt so anxious. He had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, had handled some of the toughest negotiations in the industry, yet the idea of seeing his daughter again made his hands clench at his sides. Then he saw them. Cassandra was walking toward him, holding Emma's hand. The little girl was skipping beside her, completely oblivious to the tension between the adults. The moment her eyes landed on him, she beamed, letting go of Cassandra's hand and running straight to him. You came, she said, throwing her arms around his waist just like she had the night before. Something in his chest tightened, a warmth spreading through him that he hadn't felt before. He rested a hand on her back, still unsure how to navigate this, but knowing that pulling away was the last thing he wanted to do. Of course I came, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Emma leaned back, looking up at him with excitement. Mommy said we could get ice cream after the park. Can you come too? Alex glanced at Cassandra, who had finally caught up, her expression unreadable. She gave a small nod, though there was hesitation in her eyes. If you want to, she said carefully. Alex didn't hesitate. Yeah, I want to. Emma cheered, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the playground. Come push me on the swings. He let her lead him, barely noticing the way Cassandra watched them. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about work, meetings, or the weight of his responsibilities. For the first time, he was just thinking about being a father. The sun hung low in the sky as the golden hues of late afternoon bathed the park in warm light. Laughter echoed from the playground as children ran across the grass, their joy filling the crisp autumn air. Alex stood behind Emma at the swings, his hands gently pushing her forward as she squealed with excitement. He had never done this before, had never stood in a park on a weekday afternoon, had never thought about playgrounds, swings, or how high a 6-year-old liked to be pushed. But now, nothing else mattered. Higher. Emma called, her voice bubbling with laughter as she kicked her legs. Alex smirked, giving her another push but keeping it controlled. He wasn't sure how high was too high, and the last thing he wanted was for her to get hurt. She didn't seem to have any fear, though. She trusted him completely. The thought made his chest tighten. He glanced over at Cassandra, who was sitting on a bench a few feet away, watching them with an unreadable expression. She hadn't said much since they had arrived, letting Emma take the lead. He knew she was still wary, still unsure of how all of this would play out. But he also knew she wouldn't have let him be here if she didn't believe, on some level, that he deserved this chance. Emma swung back toward him, her head tilting as she grinned. "Are you having fun, Daddy?" The word still sent a jolt through him. He hadn't earned it. Not yet. But she said it so easily, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He nodded, his voice quieter than usual. "Yeah, I am." Emma beamed before suddenly dragging her feet to slow herself down. "Okay, now it's your turn." Alex blinked. "My turn?" Emma hopped off the swing, nodding eagerly. "Yeah. You sit, and I'll push you." He glanced at Cassandra, who was now biting her lip to keep from smiling. He sighed, shaking his head. "I don't think I'll fit." Emma crossed her arms, tilting her head in exaggerated determination. "You will if you try." Alex let out a soft chuckle. All right. He sat down, the swing creaking slightly under his weight. His legs were too long, his knees bent awkwardly, and he felt ridiculous. But Emma giggled as she put both hands on his back and gave him the tiniest push. "There," she said proudly. "I pushed you." Alex barely moved, but he grinned. "Wow, strong push." Emma giggled again before stepping back. "Okay, now let's go get ice cream." She didn't wait for a response before grabbing his hand and pulling him toward Cassandra. Alex followed without resistance, feeling the small warmth of her hand in his. It was the first time in his life that someone had held his hand without an agenda, without expectation. Just pure, innocent trust. Cassandra stood as they reached her. "Ice cream, huh?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Daddy said yes." Alex raised an eyebrow at Cassandra, daring her to argue. She sighed but didn't fight it. "All right. But only one scoop." Emma cheered, dragging both of them toward the exit. As they walked side by side, Alex felt the weight of the last 6 years pressing on him. He had spent so long building his empire, chasing success, believing that control over his life was the most important thing. But now, with Emma's small hand in his and Cassandra glancing at him from the corner of her eye, he realized that he had been wrong. For the first time in years, he didn't care about meetings, deadlines, or the next big deal. For the first time, he was just a man walking with his daughter, heading to get ice cream, and he wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. The ice cream shop was small, tucked into the corner of a quiet street, its warm yellow lights spilling onto the sidewalk as the sun continued its slow descent. The scent of freshly made waffle cones filled the air, mixing with the sweetness of chocolate, vanilla, and fruit-flavored syrups. It wasn't the kind of place Alex had ever thought he would find himself in on a random weekday afternoon, yet here he was, standing in line with his 6-year-old daughter, watching her bounce excitedly on her toes as she tried to decide between strawberry and cookies and cream. Emma turned to him, her blue eyes wide with indecision. "Daddy, which one is better?" Alex glanced at the menu, realizing he had never actually thought about it before. He had never been the type to indulge in small pleasures like ice cream. His life had always been about efficiency, about necessity. He ordered what was quickest, what required the least thought. But now, faced with the innocent expectation in Emma's gaze, he realized he had no idea how to answer. "I think you should get what makes you happiest," he finally said. Emma pursed her lips in concentration before nodding decisively. "Strawberry. It's Mommy's favorite too." Alex glanced at Cassandra, who stood beside them with her arms crossed, watching the exchange quietly. He could see the slight surprise in her expression, as if she hadn't expected Emma to connect the two of them so easily. Maybe she had spent so long keeping him separate from their lives that she hadn't considered how naturally Emma would want to include him. "Good choice," Alex said as he stepped up to the counter. "One strawberry for the lady, Anne." He hesitated before adding, "Make it two." Cassandra's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You don't eat ice cream." Alex smirked. "Apparently, I do now." Emma grinned as she reached for her cone, happily licking at the pink scoop as they stepped outside. A few benches lined the sidewalk, and she quickly climbed onto one, swinging her legs as she enjoyed her treat. Alex sat beside her, watching as she made a mess of her hands but didn't seem to care. Cassandra sat down across from them, her own cone melting slightly as she studied him. "You don't have to force yourself into things just because of her." Alex met her gaze, his voice steady. "I'm not forcing anything. I'm just realizing how much I've missed." Cassandra looked down at her ice cream, her fingers tracing the edge of the cone. "I never wanted to take this away from you." Alex exhaled slowly, setting his own cone down on a napkin. "Then why did you?" She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze flickering toward Emma, who was still completely unaware of the tension between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "I was scared. When I found out I was pregnant, you were already so deep into your career, into building your company. You barely had time for anything else. I told myself that if I told you, you would feel obligated, but not invested. I didn't want Emma to grow up feeling like she was just another responsibility to you." Alex ran a hand over his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "You decided that for me." Cassandra looked up, her eyes filled with regret. "I did. And maybe I was wrong. But at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing." Alex glanced at Emma, watching the way she hummed happily as she focused on her ice cream. He had missed so much, her first steps, her first words, all the tiny moments that made up a childhood. And yet, she had accepted him so easily, without question, without hesitation. "You don't get to make that decision again," he said quietly, turning back to Cassandra. "I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." Cassandra held his gaze for a long moment before finally nodding. "I know." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Emma suddenly looked up, her lips and fingers sticky with melted ice cream. "Daddy, next time can we get sprinkles too?" Alex felt his chest tighten at the way she said next time, as if she had already decided that this was something permanent, something she didn't have to worry about losing. He smiled, reaching for a napkin to wipe the mess from her face. "Yeah, sweetheart. Next time, we'll get all the sprinkles you want." The drive back to Cassandra's apartment was quiet, the soft hum of the engine the only sound between them. Emma was in the back seat, happily swinging her legs and humming a song to herself as she finished the last bites of her ice cream cone. Alex glanced at her through the rearview mirror, watching as she licked the last bit of melted strawberry from her fingers, completely content. He still couldn't believe how easily she had accepted him. There was no hesitation in her affection, no doubts in her mind about whether or not he belonged in her life. She had called him daddy without a second thought, as if she had been waiting for him all along. The weight of that realization sat heavy on his chest. Cassandra sat beside him, her hands resting in her lap as she stared out the window. She hadn't said much since they left the ice cream shop, and he could feel the tension radiating off her. She was still processing everything, still deciding how much she was willing to let him in. He understood that, but he wasn't going to let her shut him out again. When they pulled up to the apartment building, Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and immediately reached for the door handle. Before she could hop out, Alex turned to her. "Hey, kiddo, slow down. Let me help you." Emma giggled. "I can do it." Alex smirked, shaking his head as he stepped out and walked around to her side. He opened the door just as she jumped down onto the sidewalk, landing with a little bounce before grabbing his hand without hesitation. His heart clenched at the simple gesture, at the way she trusted him so fully. Cassandra walked ahead, unlocking the front door and pushing it open. Emma pulled Alex inside with her, her energy never seeming to fade as she skipped toward the living room. "Mommy, can I watch cartoons?" Cassandra sighed, setting her purse on the counter. "Just for a little while. Go wash your hands first." Emma groaned dramatically but obeyed, disappearing down the hall. The apartment was small but cozy, filled with the little details of a life Alex had never been a part of. A row of tiny shoes lined the front door, a shelf full of colorful children's books stood against the wall, and there were drawings pinned to the refrigerator, messy crayon scribbles that Alex now knew belonged to his daughter. He took it all in, realizing how much he had missed, how much he had never even known existed. Cassandra crossed her arms, leaning against the counter as she watched him. "This is probably overwhelming for you." Alex let out a quiet breath, turning to face her. "That's an understatement." She nodded, looking down for a moment before meeting his gaze again. "I meant what I said earlier. I never wanted to take this away from you. But I also didn't know if you would want it. If you would want her." Alex's jaw tightened. "She's my daughter, Cassandra. Of course I would have wanted her." Cassandra sighed. "I know that now. But back then, I was scared. And I didn't want her growing up feeling unwanted." Alex ran a hand over his face, trying to push back the frustration simmering inside him. "You should have told me. You should have given me the choice." Cassandra looked away, guilt flickering across her face. "I know." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they hadn't said. Alex wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to the resentment he had every right to feel, but then he thought about Emma. He thought about the way she had hugged him without hesitation, the way she had smiled at him like he had always been meant to be there. "This can't be about the past anymore," he finally said, his voice softer now. "It has to be about what happens next." Cassandra studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "You're right." They both turned as Emma came running back into the room, her hands still a little damp from washing them. She grabbed Alex's hand again, looking up at him with an excited grin. "Wanna watch cartoons with me?" Alex felt his chest tighten, the warmth of her small fingers wrapping around his own anchoring him in a way he hadn't expected. He looked back at Cassandra, who was watching them carefully, her expression unreadable. Then he turned to Emma and smiled. "Yeah, kiddo. I'd love to." As she pulled him toward the couch, he realized something. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about work, deadlines, or business deals. He wasn't thinking about what he had lost or what he had missed. He was only thinking about the little girl sitting beside him, about the way she laughed at the cartoons, about the way she had made space for him in her life without hesitation. And in that moment, he knew. He wasn't going anywhere. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet moments and small steps forward. Alex found himself adjusting to a new rhythm, one that had nothing to do with board meetings or high-stakes negotiations. Instead, his days now involved spontaneous visits to the park, helping Emma pick out bedtime stories, and listening to her endless chatter about school, cartoons, and the imaginary adventures she created in her mind. It felt surreal. He had spent so much of his life believing he had everything he needed, that his carefully constructed world was complete. But now he saw how much had been missing. He had missed years of Emma's life, but somehow she made it feel like he had always been there. She trusted him without hesitation, accepted him without question, and each time she reached for his hand or called him daddy, something inside him softened in a way he never expected. Cassandra, on the other hand, was still cautious. She allowed him to spend time with Emma, but there was always an unspoken boundary between them. She didn't say no when Emma asked him to stay longer, and she never objected when he offered to help, but she also never let her guard down completely. Tonight was no different. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up with a blanket, her head resting against Alex's arm. He barely moved, afraid of waking her, but his focus wasn't on the cartoon that was still playing softly on the television. His eyes were on Cassandra, who stood by the kitchen, watching them with an unreadable expression. He could tell she had something to say. After a moment, she let out a quiet breath and walked over, sitting down in the chair across from him. She glanced at Emma before looking back at him, her voice low. "You're really staying, aren't you?" Alex met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes." She nodded slowly, as if she had expected that answer but still needed to hear it out loud. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Letting you in. Letting this happen. It's scary for me, Alex." He understood that. He had spent years feeling in control of every aspect of his life, and now he was in completely uncharted territory. But for Cassandra, this was even harder. She had spent 6 years believing she had to do this alone, and now, suddenly, everything had changed. "I'm not here to make things harder for you," he said quietly. "I just want to be here for her. And if that means taking it slow, I will." Cassandra exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face. "I don't want her to get hurt." "I won't hurt her," he said firmly. "I know I missed so much, and I can never get that time back. But I'm not going anywhere, Cassandra. Not now, not ever." She studied him for a long time, searching his face for something, maybe for proof that he was telling the truth. After what felt like forever, she finally nodded. "Okay." That one word felt heavier than anything she had said before. It wasn't full trust, not yet, but it was something. It was a step forward. Emma stirred slightly in her sleep, shifting against Alex's arm. He looked down at her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, his movements careful, gentle. He never thought he would be the type of man who could sit in a quiet living room, holding his daughter as she slept, but now he couldn't imagine wanting to be anywhere else. Cassandra stood slowly. "I'll get her to bed." Alex hesitated before speaking. "Let me." She froze for a moment, then nodded. Carefully, he lifted Emma into his arms, surprised by how small she felt, how naturally she fit against him. She murmured something in her sleep but didn't wake as he carried her down the hall and into her room. The walls were painted soft lavender, shelves lined with stuffed animals and books. He laid her down gently, pulling the blanket over her, lingering for a moment as he watched her breathe deeply. She was his. His daughter. And he would do everything in his power to make sure she never felt like she was alone again. As he stepped out of the room, he found Cassandra waiting in the hallway. She crossed her arms, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're good with her." Alex looked at her, his voice just as quiet. "She makes it easy." Cassandra didn't respond right away. Then, after a long moment, she spoke again. "I think I was wrong about you." He gave her a small, tired smile. "I think we were both wrong about a lot of things." She let out a soft, almost reluctant laugh. "Yeah. Maybe." Neither of them said anything else, but something between them shifted in that moment. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't a resolution, but it was something new. A possibility. A beginning. For now, that was enough. The next morning, Alex found himself doing something he had never done before, sitting at a small kitchen table with a cup of coffee while his 6-year-old daughter happily ate breakfast across from him. It was a simple moment, one that most people wouldn't think twice about, but for him, it was something entirely new. He had spent years waking up in a penthouse, drinking coffee alone while reading through business reports. Now, he was watching Emma dunk pieces of her toast into her orange juice, giggling every time she made a mess. Cassandra moved around the kitchen, making herself a cup of tea, her movements slower than usual. She had been quiet since last night, since she had admitted that maybe she had been wrong about him. He knew it wasn't easy for her to say, and he also knew that trust wouldn't come overnight. But it was a step forward, and for now, that was enough. Emma kicked her legs under the table and grinned up at him. "Can we go to the park again today?" Alex smirked, sipping his coffee. "You trying to make me a full-time swing pusher?" Emma giggled. "Yes." Cassandra let out a soft laugh as she sat down with her tea. "We can go after lunch." Emma clapped her hands, satisfied with that answer. Then, suddenly, she turned to Alex with wide, excited eyes. "Can we go to your house too?" The question caught him off guard. He hesitated, glancing at Cassandra, who stiffened slightly but didn't say anything. He turned back to Emma, choosing his words carefully. "Would you want to?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah. I want to see where you live." Alex exhaled slowly. He hadn't thought about how this transition would work, how Emma would fit into his life outside of these moments. His penthouse was nothing like this apartment. It was sleek, modern, and impersonal, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. It had never felt like a home, and now, as he imagined Emma running through the spacious, empty rooms, he realized just how cold it would seem to her. He looked at Cassandra again, waiting for her reaction. She took a slow sip of her tea before finally speaking. "Not today," she said gently. "But soon." Emma pouted slightly but nodded. "Okay." Alex could tell that Cassandra was still figuring this out, still deciding how much she was ready to let him in. He understood that. He had missed 6 years, and no matter how much he wanted to make up for lost time, it had to be on Emma's terms. And, whether he liked it or not, on Cassandra's too. The rest of the morning passed in easy conversation. Emma talked about school, about her favorite cartoons, about how she wanted to be an astronaut one day but also a ballerina and maybe a scientist too. Alex listened to every word, committing every detail to memory. He had spent so many years thinking that success was measured by deals closed and profits earned, but now he was realizing that it was in moments like this. Sitting at a kitchen table, listening to his daughter dream about the future. When it was time to leave for the park, Emma reached for both of their hands, holding onto them as they walked out the door. Alex glanced at Cassandra, who looked surprised but didn't pull away. They walked down the street like that, the three of them together, something unspoken settling between them. At the park, Emma ran ahead to the swings, already calling for Alex to push her. He laughed, shaking his head as he followed her. Cassandra sat on a bench nearby, watching them with a look that was softer than before. After a while, Emma ran off to play with a few other children, leaving Alex and Cassandra sitting in the shade. She crossed her arms, her gaze still on their daughter. "She really loves you," she said quietly. Alex exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how I got so lucky." Cassandra finally looked at him. "You didn't get lucky, Alex. You showed up." He met her gaze, something shifting between them again. This time, it wasn't just about Emma. It was about them, about the past, about the possibility of something neither of them had expected. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "I don't know what this looks like, what it means for the future. But I do know that Emma is happier with you in her life. And if I'm being honest, I think I am too." Alex wasn't sure what to say to that. He wasn't sure if she was ready for anything more, if they could ever be what they once were. But he also knew that, for the first time, she wasn't pushing him away. Instead of answering, he looked back at Emma, watching as she ran through the grass, her laughter filling the air. Whatever happened next, whatever the future held, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going anywhere. This story isn't just about a millionaire CEO discovering he has a daughter, it's about transformation, redemption, and the unexpected ways life forces us to face what truly matters. Alex starts as a man who believes he has control over everything, a man whose life revolves around power and success. But when Emma enters his world, everything he thought he knew about himself unravels. The beauty of this story lies in its subtlety. It's not a grand, dramatic redemption arc where Alex suddenly becomes the perfect father overnight. Instead, it's a journey filled with quiet moments, pushing his daughter on the swings, learning how she takes her ice cream, understanding that love isn't about what he can provide but about being present. Cassandra's role is just as crucial. She isn't just the woman who kept a secret, she's a mother who made a choice she thought was best. Her hesitation, her fears, and her slow acceptance of Alex's presence feel real. She doesn't forgive him instantly, nor does she immediately fall back into the past. Instead, she observes, tests, and slowly begins to believe that maybe, just maybe, Alex truly means it when he says he isn't leaving this time. Emma is the heart of it all. Her innocence, her immediate trust in Alex, and her unwavering belief that he belongs in her life are what make this story so powerful. She doesn't care about his wealth, his status, or his past mistakes. To her, he is simply her father, the man she has been waiting for without even realizing it. The ending isn't about perfection. It's not tied up with a neat bow. There are still challenges ahead, still wounds that will take time to heal. But there's hope. Hope that a man who once measured his worth in success has found something far more valuable. Hope that a woman who once feared letting him in has found the courage to try. Hope that a little girl who called him daddy without hesitation will never again have to wonder if he'll come back. And that hope is what makes this story truly complete.